Good morning. Today is April 28th, 2024, and our topic today is Lift Up the World, Light Up the World. And
we're lifting it today with a new camera.
Yes, we are.
So we won't be disappearing, which is nice. And we can sit side by side and move without the other one.
Yes, so I want to share with you that we have this topic because the National Day of Prayer is an annual observance held on the first Thursday of May. So it will be this coming Thursday, inviting people to turn to God in prayer and meditation. It was created in 1952 by a joint resolution of the United States Congress and signed into law by President Harry Truman. The theme for the 2024 National Day of Prayer is Lift Up the World, Light Up the World. And I realized when I saw this theme that I have been watching the daily news, and everywhere there's a different disaster somewhere in the world or our country, and I've been fretting about it. I've been upset by it. I've been wishing I could do something to help, and I've been feeling helpless, and I have not done what I know to do, which is affirmative prayer. Because I know, even though I may not stop a war with affirmative prayer, every time any of us go to source and know the truth, which is peace, love, and harmony, we change. We change the dynamics a little bit. And that's what all of us need to be doing during this time. Instead of fretting and worrying and unhappy with what we're seeing on television and the people who are suffering, we need to know the truth with a capital T. We need to know that all is well. And I'd like you to tell the truth story
I want
about.
to back up a little bit.
Okay.
And first, if we can accept, thank you, if we can accept the idea that there is a divine intelligence that operates in and through everything, that is through the trees, the birds, the grass, the flowers, the plants, and we have lots of evidence to support that there is an intelligence in everything. We know this from, I can't remember, I'll never remember names, but the person who did a lot of experimenting with plants. And he would holler at the plants and scream at the plants and call them names, and they wilted.
Mhm.
He spoke positively and lovingly and caringly, and they blossomed, they flowered, they grew. And so they have an intelligence. If everything has an intelligence that I would call the divine intelligence, then everything is connected. And if everything is connected, then you're connected to the everything that is in this world that we're talking about. And so a short story, true evidence, actually from a nature program that I saw that we both saw and loved. And they were talking about the trees in the forest. And in the forest,
First of all, I'd like to say we used to think that trees always competed with each
Mm.
other for sunlight, for water, that they were in competition, and the weaker ones would lose always to the bigger ones. But
And in fact, the older trees allow the feeding of the younger trees. They support that by not taking all of the water that they could take, and they allow that water and the minerals and the vitamins that the little trees, the saplings need to go to the saplings. So the trees that are closest to the new ones support and feed the new ones. But the other thing that I found really fascinating is that if there's going to be an infestation of some sort, and it starts on the outer side of the forest,
with bugs or
infestation of some sort. And what happens is the trees communicate to each other that there's an infestation, that there's danger. And as that gets communicated to all of the trees begin to excrete whatever enzymes or whatever they can excrete that would discourage or impair the parasites or the insects from destroying them. The way they do this is what's interesting. They do this through the root system, and they do this through a fungus that connect to the roots. So here we have fungus underground. You would think they didn't talk to the trees. They have nothing to do with the trees. They're their own little thing. But in fact, they are part of the communication network. They're the Verizon under the ground that communicates to all of the trees the information that is needed. So here we have a really interesting situation, but I think it's the example of how the universe works, in that everything is connected. I often see a spider web, and the spider's way over in the corner. and he's just maybe watching HBO or doing something interesting, and something touches one of the outer strings of the web. Every movement on the web anywhere is felt everywhere, and the spider knows it. Well, God is not a spider, but the good news is we live in a web. We live in an interconnected network that where everything that we do is connected to everyone and everything. Sadly, we dump stuff into the ocean, and not only does it hurt us, but the stuff we dump in the ocean that goes down a mile or two and we don't see it and think it's gone shows up on the beach. And it shows up on our beaches.
Or in the fish and in our
Oh,
bodies.
yeah, it shows up everywhere. But the bottom line is we didn't think when we dumped things in the ocean that they were connected to us. Out of sight, out of mind, it's gone. And we've had that mentality for a long time, out of sight, out of mind. And I think one of the problems is we've had that notion with God too, out of sight, can't see God, maybe there isn't one.
There probably isn't one, yeah.
Or we've made God like a person in the sky, an imaginary person in the sky who keeps score. And, we got to make him happy because he has a temper. And that's been God, a lot of us.
Like your father.
To be nice to him. And thee and thou is really helpful whenever you're praying, things like that. But but what we've done is we've made God so small that we can't have that huge impact that we want to have. We can't have any impact at all in our mind's eye because we don't see God running around where there's a war and trying to solve the war. But the war is solved one prayer at a time. The war is solved when the prayer that we're having is the prayer that the people who are having war are having. And it may take some time before they hear that prayer. It may be some time before that happens. And I'm sure you've all had happen. You have something on your mind. You're thinking a lot about it. It's important to you. And within the day or two, you bump into somebody with the same kind of situation. I know when I was getting ready to publish my Diary of a Mindful Dog, I didn't have a publisher. I didn't know how to get a publisher. I didn't know much about publishing, but I wanted a publisher. I get on the airplane to fly to California, I think it was, and I get to sit next to Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yeah, I can't remember his name
Yeah.
right now, but
The author of Chicken Soup.
or the compiler.
Yeah, right.
Compiler of stories.
Sat next to him for 2 hours and we talked. I didn't publish with his network or with his program, but the information he gave me was useful. And more importantly than that, what was on my mind, I really believe had something to do with who I got to sit next to.
Probably, yeah.
And so who do we sit next to in life? Who do we sit next to in consciousness? We're in the middle of a divine intelligence that's operating everywhere. We're not invisible.
Exactly. I want to go back to the analogy of the spider web.
Jack Canfield.
Jack Canfield, yes.
Thank you, Gurvanam.
Oh, did she give us that? Thank you. So just imagine that spider web. And India, they have, in Hinduism, they have this concept and they call that Indra's net, Indra, Indra's net. And I don't know exactly who Indra is, but it represents us, the universe. And every place that network connects is a light. And each one of those lights is a soul. And so we're all interconnected. And when something happens someplace, yes, it is a beautiful, and some of those lights get brighter than the others, when they are doing something like affirmative prayer or some good deed. And so the idea is we're all interconnected. We cannot be apart. We can believe, well, that's across the ocean. It has nothing to do with us, that country, for example. But in fact, we're all connected. And so what can we do when we see war in other places, when we see storms, when we see earthquakes, when we see tornadoes? What can we do? Well, we can do affirmative prayer. And in doing that, we lift up the world and we light up the world. I started out, some of you hadn't joined us yet, but I started out by saying that this Thursday is in National Day of Prayer. And it was started in 1952 by Congress. I can't imagine them doing such a thing today, but they still honor it. And the theme for this Thursday is lift up the world, light up the world. So what I know about that is, for myself, I will make myself feel better if when I hear of a disaster or tragedy, and still, instead of feeling empathy and sadness for those people suffering, what I can do is go inside and do an affirmative prayer, knowing that in spirit all is well. And as we know that and know that peace is the truth of what we want and have on earth, peace, love, joy, that it actually changes slightly. And the more of us that do it, we lift the world. So I want to share with you a couple of quotes here from various people about this kind of prayer. The first one is Ernest Holmes, the founder of our movement that we call Centers for Spiritual Living. And he says to daily meditate on the goodness of life and embody the great ideal is the royal road to freedom. And to that peace which passeth understanding, it is happiness to the soul of humankind. So to meditate daily on the goodness of life, even if what we're seeing is not goodness, we can know the truth is goodness. Eric Butterworth was a New York City minister with Unity, and he said, prayer is not something we do to God, but to ourselves. It's not a position, but a disposition. It's not flattery, but a sense of oneness. It's not asking, but knowing. It's not words, but feeling. It's not will, but willingness. Yes.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of a real experience that I had some years ago. I was doing affirmative healing prayer. And I say affirmative healing prayer with a healing intention and with actually quite a bit of success, and so much success that someone in California who had a child that had been in a coma heard about the healing affirmative prayer that I was doing and called me and said, my child is in a coma. They want to do some surgery. They would like to have the child not be in a coma to be able to make a better assessment of the condition the child is in. Can you help? And I'm thinking, you're in California and I'm in Florida. I said, would you put the telephone receiver on the child's chest? And they did. And I listened to the child breathe. And I began to do my affirmative healing prayer.
Did you do it silently or out loud?
Silently.
Silently.
Just, and what I was waiting for that occurred was a rush of energy, an emotional experience that felt very, very powerful. And whenever I would do that kind of healing prayer, there would be this welling up of energy that I could feel that would be very, very powerful. And that's what happens very often when we're doing affirmative prayers. We could feel that in our heart. Often when we're doing it out loud, you hear it in the person's voice. They become stronger and clearer and emphatic. So the baby woke up and they were delighted and I was delighted. And I confess to having doubt when they asked me and intermittently feeling a bit of doubt even in the process because I didn't know that it was possible. But even though I didn't know in my brain that it was possible, I knew in my heart that it was possible. And I was willing to open my heart and be available for that experience, whether or not I could entirely believe that these things happen or not. And even after it happened, I had to ask myself, did that really happen?
I know. We always doubt. And by the way, this is not the way he learned to do affirmative prayer. We learned that
see it, say it, feel it, know it.
You just do it. With I'm talking about the telephone on the chest of the baby. That's nothing he ever learned. But these were people that were not in our teaching. They did not know affirmative prayer. They just heard he did healing. And so he needed to do something for them to feel like something was happening, and it worked as prayer, affirmative prayer often works.
Right.
But so that's a great story and a great example of the lifting up, and Bob has many stories, as do I, of this working instantaneously.
We're working in a universe where we're all connected. A young man on a motorcycle.
Like Indra's net, yes.
A young man on a motorcycle crashes his motorcycle, is in intensive care, he's a Native American. And I got a call from a Native American friend of his that he was in the hospital, and although that person didn't know me, had heard about me and said, would you go to the hospital and see him? I went to the hospital to see him, and his lymphatic system was in serious trouble. So he was probably a third to 2/3 larger than his normal self because everything was swollen. He was on IVs, and the nurse said to me, he will be lucky if he gets through the night, but you're welcome to do whatever you want to do. He's not conscious. I did the same kind of prayer healing work that I do. And I also did the same prayer healing work that I do on the IV bottles that were going to be used during the night. And so left it alone. The next day I went back. His lymphatic system was no longer in trouble. He was no longer swelled up. He was no longer in critical condition. I went back a week later and he said, "Oh, you're the person who visited me when I was in the intensive care that first night." And I said, "How did you know that? Because you were unconscious. You were in a coma." He said, "I saw you. You were like a light that came in, and I recognized you, and I recognize you now." And who knew? And he got better. So, and his frame of reference for me was that I was a chief coming to see him. I was a healing person in his tribe. He saw me as he needed to see me in order to be able
Oh,
to.
was he a Native American?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
I see.
And very,
Interesting.
very, very involved in the teaching of Native American teaching. So he saw me as someone who was a part of his tribe.
That's fantastic. And I'm going to share one that I had that surprised me, a healing that I did that surprised me. But before I do, it makes you want to cry. Yeah. But first I want to remind you that even though we've had these wonderful experiences of successful healing with spiritual mind treatment, are forgetting to do it for the planet. And we need to be doing it daily for our planet, for the wars, for the disasters, because every prayer is a something. It lifts up the whole Indra's net, you know. And so the story I want to share is of a young man that was in when Bob and I were working with eating disorders in a hospital in an inpatient setting. We had a man who was anorexic. Now you rarely find men who are anorexic because it's usually females who are obsessed with being thin enough. But he had had an accident at work. He was in construction and fell from a ladder and injured his feet. So it hurt to stand on his feet. So he didn't bother to get up to go to the kitchen to fix himself something to eat. And he got so thin that he became anorexic. And we know from experiments done in prisons, if you starve men, they become anorexic too, just like mostly young girls and women do. So he was out of a treatment, but I had been his counselor, and his lung collapsed, and he was in the hospital. And he called me and asked me if I would come and see him, and I did. And he was actually being prepped for surgery, and they told me they didn't really expect him to survive because he was so weak. And so I was, again, wanting to do something to make him feel like I was doing something because he didn't know about affirmative prayer. I put my hands right over his chest and I was doing silently, I was doing maybe out loud, I don't remember. I was doing affirmative prayer for him. And the surgeon came in and looked at me very suspiciously, like, "What the heck are you doing, woman?" And I quickly put my hands back and said goodbye. Well, I'd done what I could. I really didn't expect much results. But he came through that surgery just fine. He survived it. He later came to see me as in my private practice for psychotherapy because he was depressed. And he was depressed until he won the lottery. When he won the lottery, he was no longer depressed and he quit coming to see me. So I assume that all was well with him from that point on because he didn't need to see me anymore. But we share these stories not to.
It's not about us.
It's not about us. It's about the
It
power
works.
of
It works.
positive prayer.
And the truth is that we both have our doubts during, before, during, and after. And it doesn't make any difference. Do what you can in favor of an outcome that you'd like to see, whether or not you can 100% embrace it all of the time. We're never 100% on anything.
Yeah,
I
we
did,
just lift up
I did the same kind of prayer
world.
healing work with a woman who had cancer, and I've done lots of this, and I've seen lots of the people that I've worked with not get better.
Mhm.
And so it's frustrating because you don't know when what you're doing is going to make a difference, because you don't know what their story is or their condition is underneath that has them have this in the first place.
Mhm.
But I did the work for her, and I felt good about the work, and she said, "This is wonderful." And she said, because she was very wealthy, she said, "If this goes away, you'll never have to worry for the rest of your life. I will take care of you and your practice and whatever, because this is incredible." I thought, okay, well, whatever. And of course, I didn't mind the idea of that. And about a month went by, and I called her and I said, "So how are you doing?" She said, "Well, so far so good." And I said, "Okay." And then I called her a month later and she said, "Well, the cancer's in remission." I said, "Okay, so what do you think?" She said, "Well, we'll get together down the road a bit, but I want to make sure it's not coming back."
Didn't she say, "I'm waiting for it to come
Yeah,
back"?
yeah,
Some
yeah.
of them have said, "I'm
Yeah.
waiting for it to come back
I think,
before I decide that I
yeah,
really
yeah.
had a healing."
Anyway, I never saw her again, and she was able to maintain her great wealth, and I don't know how healthy she was, and I couldn't take the healing back, and I wouldn't. But we have this reticence. We know that there's another dimension of life. We know that we're multidimensional. We know there's more, and yet there's some part of us that is willing to settle for what we can see, hear, feel, and touch. And many of these experiences you can't see, feel, hear, or touch. I know when your son, who has passed away, connected with you, you couldn't see it. You could
I
certainly feel it.
he I didn't do treatment for him because he did not believe in it and he did not ask for it. And we teach that you do not do this unless someone asks for it.
But when he came through to you after he passed, you couldn't see him.
Right, but I could hear him.
Yeah, right. So, but you couldn't hear him with your outer ears.
No,
You heard him with your inner ear. And so if we depend on everything in the universe to work in favor of us based on our senses, we're going to have more sense than that.
well, we have our outer senses and our inner senses
Exactly.
because it sounded just like someone speaking in a room,
Yeah. Well,
but it was an inner hearing.
when I had a stroke in 2014, I was sleeping quietly. No one was in the room. And all of a
It
sudden,
was 3 in the morning.
3 o'clock in the morning, a voice said, "Get up." I sat up, my arm hit the wall. I was having a stroke. And the problem would have been if I'd not gotten up at 3 o'clock in the morning, by 4 o'clock, I wouldn't have gotten any of my abilities that I have now back.
So see, you hear voices too.
Stop, stop bringing up the past. Yeah. And we both have a mental health history of working in mental health. Okay. That's our history, working in mental health. Right.
I would like to go back because we're getting close to time and stress that we do this affirmative prayer because this is the way Jesus did prayer according to the New Testament. And I want to read some that are shared by Scott Aubrey, who is a retired minister in our teaching. And he said, Jesus was the master of praying affirmatively. Read the Sermon on the Mount, and you'll see that Jesus always spoke affirmatively. Read his prayers. His prayers were positive statements of truth. He prayed, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. I know that thou hearest me always. Lazarus, come forth. Or pick up thy bed and walk. Or thy faith has made thee whole. Jesus' prayers were statements of fact because he knew of his oneness with God, and that in this connection he represented God as he prayed, as he lived.
They talked funny back then.
Yeah, they did. But or at least the British did when they translated that. Um, so so what can we do about our earth when we see war? What can we do to help? Instead of blaming one side or the other, taking a side, we can do affirmative prayer. And I think we should close by doing an affirmative prayer to show an example of what we can do when we're upset by storms
That's a good idea.
and devastation,
Right.
wars. Okay. So shall we do that now? All right, I'm going to start and we'll alternate. So we know right here, right now, that there's but one source, one creator of all life. That source we call by many names. We know it as God. We know it as Mother, Father God. We know it as infinite intelligence and universal love. But whatever name we call it, we acknowledge that source. We acknowledge that we are part of it. We are one with it in energy. It hears, feels, listens to our every thought.
No matter the size of the tragedy, the difficulty, the combat, the war, the condition, we know that in this world, we are not the condition, nor is anyone bound to a condition. So we know that in the heart of each of us and the soul of each of us, there is a great victory being accomplished. There is great love being expressed. And the outcome, however it might appear, is not the outcome that is in fact truly happening. What is happening at the deepest and most profound level is a healing that is necessary, that is possible, that is practical, that is happening right here and right now in every area where there is distress, where there is difficulty.
Even when there is apparent death of the physical body, we know the truth of that soul is that it is eternal. And so it lives on. So we know that what is true for human beings is what is true for God, which is that the truth of us is that we are loving beings, caring for one another. So we see this happening with countries who are seemingly at war with each other. Let's know that the truth of their hearts and their being is love and caring and compassion. We see that in the world. We see it where there are storms. Many times the storms are opportunities for people to show their caring, their love, their empathy with those who have been injured or hurt or have had loss. So we see all of it as healing. We see all of it as love.
We know this to be true. We know that we reach deep into the heart and the soul of consciousness and take from it the love that we need and give to it the love that we have. So we are by nature made of, constructed of, expressing and overfilled or overfull with love.
And so it is.
And so it is.
And so it is just a translation of Amen, if you've ever wondered. So whew, that's a good thing to do instead of just saying, ain't it awful? This is terrible. So we would like to invite you now. Where do I find screen share?
Up at the top, I think.
I think it's right here.
Oh, okay.
We would like to invite you. I don't know what's happening. Screens, documents. We have a new system here and it's not. Okay, so can't do that.
Deny. Okay.
So
you have to talk about it.
All right, so we invite you to support this ministry, and you can do so by going to our website, which is CSL, which stands for Centers for Spiritual Living, Palm Beaches at gmail.com. And nope, that's our email. CSLPalmBeaches.org is our website. And when you do that, when you go to that place, there is a place saying ways to donate. And let's see, ways to donate and shows you ways to donate. So many of you are already doing that. We thank you. Is there anything here that says no? Okay.
So just if you win the lottery, please let us know.
Also, let's see, it's coming up soon. So I would like to remind you that we have the class that I'm teaching along with Dr. Pamela Gray, and it's on Saturdays. It's going to be Saturday, the shoot, I had that up Saturday, not this Saturday, but the next Saturday. And so that shoot, can't find it. So anyway, it's going to be on health. So if you have any health issues that you'd like to attend a class about it, we invite you, we welcome you. And I'll get that information. It's on our website and whatnot. So we're going to stop recording now.